witnesses report. So, morning, guys. It's Wednesday morning, the 17th of April. We've got a couple of witnesses that we need to hear from in regards to H706. And I believe they're with us. Are they on?
They are with us. You call their name and I'll bet they'll show up.
John, can you hear us?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good morning. Sorry about yesterday, but I think you waited and waited and we ran out of time, and so we'll got a few minutes here this morning, so we thought we would invite you back, and I still got a couple of committee members, well, they're in their chairs spiritually. But one of them I know had to go see our boss, but they'll be along shortly. And Brian, you want to introduce?
Yep. Brian Collingwater, representing the Rutland County District.
I'm Rich Wesley from Wales.
And I'm Bobby Scott from Orleans County. So we want to give you as much time as we can. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Starr. And I had the opportunity to watch yesterday's proceedings, and it was very informative. I don't have a whole lot for you guys today. I don't have a presentation. I just felt it was necessary for our association to go on record here. I did testify when the bill was over on the House side, and I think a lot of points you've heard reiterated over and over again. So for the record, good morning, everyone. John Gaeta, Director of State Affairs for RISE. We are the National Trade Association representing the manufacturers, formulators, and distributors of specialty or non-agricultural pesticides. I had the opportunity to testify in front of this committee earlier this year on the rodenticide bill. So thank you for having me back, and thank you for taking so much time to deliberate this matter, hearing from both sides of the aisle. So like I said, nothing I'm going to say today is new to you. I do just want to fill in some gaps and perhaps just point out some things for the official record here. As the association representing the folks that make these products that would be eventually banned in this bill, we are opposed to the bill. I do respect and I appreciate the gentleman from the golf industry who showed up yesterday, who asked for a specific exemption for his uses in the turf and ornamental space. However, on behalf of the broader industry, I'm here today not to seek a specific exemption, but rather to say that this bill is bad policy. It is something that we do oppose, and we would ask for a vote in the negative here. There are many reasons why this bill should not go forward. This bill is highly political. I will say that you had the gentleman from Cornell yesterday, and I have read his report. He spends a great deal of, him and his colleagues, they spent a great deal of the 400 plus pages talking about treated seed, the impacts of treated seed, things like that. And there is, within those 400 pages, 4 pages dedicated to turf and ornamental studies of neonics. And so I want to read for you just a summary of what they found when it comes to turf and ornamental neonics. They found, Cornell, that neonicotinoids are very useful. They are beneficial to growers in turf and ornamental and landscape management sectors. The report states that they were extremely effective in managing pests. They also found that there would be additional costs to applicators if neonics were no longer available. And they also highlighted that limiting the use of neonics would cause over-reliance on pyrethroids and organophosphates. So you've heard this over and over again. I believe the farmer yesterday even spoke about resistance. He named a few products. Eventually, as you eliminate the tools in the toolbox, the pests become, over tolerant to the products, and the resistance becomes an issue. That's something that we at RISE, we preach pretty diligently, is that integrated pest management relies on maintaining all of the tools in the toolbox. So I will say, Vermont has taken legislative steps already. In 2019, you became a state that took these products in the turf and ornamental space out of the hands of homeowners and consumers They are a restricted use product. So for these neonics to be used currently in the state of Vermont, in these settings, you do have to have a professional applicator's license. You all are aware of that. We're here today because this bill takes it a further step. It says no more uses. So we as an industry are very much opposed to that. We do find this to be a highly political decision. And you might ask yourself that, there's probably a handful of states. It's about 8 to 10 states that have taken some type of action legislatively on the use of neonics, and then the 38 to 40 other states have not taken this type of action. Perhaps there should be some data. I believe the first state was in 2016 to take neonics out of the hands of homeowners and consumers. Perhaps the folks at Cornell could point to me some data sets that show that taking these products out of these hands has done something different for bee population. And unfortunately, if you look state by state, you look at bees populations, what you see is populations going up and down, up and down. It varies from year to year. You all heard there are a number of factors that play into pollinator health, varroa mites, climate change. They list pesticides as an issue. So this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. And I would say that it is telling that when you did have the gentleman from Cornell in here, he said neonics, banning neonics might have an impact. Well, in 2020, when that report came out, they did have the time to observe states that had taken the action to ban neonics in 2016, and they did not take any action within their study to observe that. So I will say there is clearly a lack of data that shows that these neonic bans are effective. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Just wanted to be officially on the record, letting you folks know that we are opposed to this bill.
Yeah, well, thank you, John, for your testimony. Where are you out of, John?
I'm in the Chicago suburbs. Personally, our association is based in the Washington, D.C. area, but I am a remote employee calling in today from Elgin, Illinois.
Yeah, and hey, you said there's some other states that had taken action on this?
Yes.
What are- Go ahead.
Yeah, starting in 2016, you have a handful of states. So it goes Maryland, Connecticut, Massachusetts. It's pretty much your northeastern corridor. These are the states that have taken legislative action to make these products restricted use. And then if you zoom over to the west part of the country, we do have your typical suspects there: California, Oregon, and Washington. But that whole middle part of the country and the south part of the country, they have all heard these bills just like you have heard today, and they have taken the action to not move forward with these types of bills. So I have testified all over the country. It is just in the Northeast and in the West where we've seen these bills be passed by legislatures.
So it's the two sides of the country, isn't it, where the food's grown, they haven't taken any action.
That's a fair categorization.
Yeah, questions from committee members, Irene?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard you say that neonic bans were not effective, and I just don't, I wonder, not effective doing what? Killing bees, preserving?
I was referring to the fact that we had heard that neonic bans would lead to changing bee populations. I can't point to any data that suggests that a state like Maryland that has had a ban for 8 years now had seen any consistent trend in bee population. So that's what I'm referring to.
And has Maryland banned the use of them in seed coatings or just the consumer use?
Just consumer use. That's all. I am not an expert on seed. I am here today to testify purely on turf and ornamental uses.
Yeah.
Okay, so golf courses are still using them in Maryland?
Well, yes, they are accessible. They could use them. It's just the homeowner does not have the ability to use them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Other questions? Well, good reaction. Good. Yeah, well, thank you for your time, and we'll, I don't know where we are with this, but the end of this week or the first part of next week's crunch time. So thanks again for your time and your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Starr. Thank you, members of the committee.
Thank you.
So Riley, Titus. Good morning.
Morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. And we've got about 15 minutes for your presentation. Does that give you enough time, Riley?
Yeah, that should be fine. And I'm just similar to the last testifier, John. I will just be speaking. I don't have a presentation or slides.
Yeah, and we'll introduce ourselves.
Yep, Brian Collmore representing the Rutland County District.
Irene Renner, Chittenden, North, which includes Fairfax.
Rich Westman, Whale District.
And I'm Bobby Starr from Orleans County up north.
Well, nice to be with you this morning. Appreciate the opportunity. I had a chance to be on and listen to most of yesterday as well. So good to be back with you. My name is Riley Titus. I'm Director of State Government Relations with CropLife America. We represent the manufacturers, formulators, and distributors of pesticide products. So I'm here opposing the bill and appreciate, again, the opportunity to speak with you. I've had a chance to listen in to most of the proceedings in the House. I've listened to most of the proceedings in the Senate as well. I know that you all have heard from a lot of people on this issue on both sides, House as well. So I know you all are taking in a lot of information. I know you're also here toward the end, so most of what I'll mention you've probably heard in some form or fashion, but I would like to just reiterate some points here. So our industry, we innovate, right? We are always looking to bring better performing, safe, environmentally safe products to market. There's a process in place for that. We are regulated by the EPA under FIFRA, our existing statute. And that process takes about 12 and a half years. And about 1 in 10,000 of those chemistries go from concept to market, and it's quite resource intensive. And the latest figures put that at about approximately 300 million to bring one of these technologies to market through that lengthy process. So EPA ensures that each of these pesticides will perform its intended function without unreasonable, adverse, or unintended effects on human health or the environment. And in order to meet that standard, every new pesticide is evaluated for potential effects on humans, wildlife, plants, and other organisms. EPA evaluates their toxicity and chemical properties, or as you would classify it, the hazard, as well as the amount, frequency, and length of exposure to a chemical to determine if a product causes unintended effects. So I just want to reiterate that point that there is a process in place through the EPA. It's lengthy, it's costly, it's rigorous, and I would argue that we are one of the most stringently regulated products on the market. Unlike pharmaceuticals, where it's just mainly human health, we're looking at environmental fate, e-tox, and impacts on any environmental aspects as well. There's a dual regulation with EPA, and in the state of Vermont, it's the Agency of Agriculture. So when you look at neonics, the chemistry in question here, they have, when they first were introduced, it was quite revolutionary given the ability for them to control their targeted organisms while also being very efficacious for the handler and applicator. I think that was touched on yesterday. That's been part of their popularity in the market, right? That's been why they've been so widely adopted and been so widely demanded and used ultimately. For this class of chemistry, when a product goes through that initial EPA registration process, that it doesn't stop there. It's required by law that it's re-evaluated and re-registered after at least within every 15 years. Most oftentimes sooner, it goes through that re-registration process. So for neonics, we are anticipating a decision this year in 2024. The interim decision is expected this year. Prior to that, EPA has conducted preliminary pollinator-only risk assessment, which was issued for public comment in 2016. Preliminary aquatic-only ecological assessment issued for public comment in 2017. Preliminary human health risk assessment issued for public comment in 2017. Remaining non-pollinator ecological risk assessment issued for public comment in 2017. So there's opportunity for all stakeholders to weigh in. That's folks like environmental groups, industry groups, farmers, stakeholders, applicators can all weigh into that process. Updated, then in 2020, updated pollinator risk assessment and a proposed interim decision was released January 2020. Draft listed species biological evaluation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and NIMS was issued in August of 2021, and then final listed species biological evaluation was issued in June of 2022. Lastly, jeopardy and adverse modification analysis in April 2023. This is just to give you a sense of all the work that EPA is putting in, not only to the registration, but the re-registration, taking in the most contemporary science and data available. That's reports like Dr. McArt's, literature out there, and any other information available as they evaluate contemporary data and research on this product.
Riley, did you say in 2020 they dealt with the bee issue?
Yes, they updated their pollinator risk assessment and proposed interim decision, which was released in January 2020.
What kind of a report did they, briefly, do you know what they said?
Yeah, there was not much a shift from what is currently registered uses and impacts. I will send to the committee that 2020 report that covers that. But what they would do there is look at, is there any mitigations that are needed from this chemistry in current uses, given the current information that we have? And if so, then they would be included in any updated interim decisions, which we expect this year. So I will send that 2020 report to you with a summary of what is in that.
Yeah, thank you.
Just to add lastly on the regulatory side of this, last year EPA did also issue, as part of kind of this review of this chemistry and also the treated seed technology, an advance notice of proposed rulemaking on treated seed, seeking additional information on the use of pesticide treated seed from stakeholders. So they will go through this iterative process again, taking in the latest data, science, literature, and input from both environmentalists, industry, farmers, applicators, and evaluate all of these things. EPA can be referred to and maybe considered, some nameless, faceless organization or agency. These are highly qualified and technical scientists that have the credentials in order to evaluate these sorts of things, this science, and then make these sort of decisions. These are people that breathe the same air, drink the same water, eat the same food as all of us. So I know sometimes we can kind of use EPA, well, they're not doing enough, we should do more, but these are decisions that are happening from informed individuals and experts. We talked, I heard yesterday, I did hear the testimony from the farmers about their uses. I would just say I think who more than farmers value pollinators, right? They're an integral piece of their operation.
You
Okay.
almost think that bees would be the most important to them.
I think they're pretty darn important for some of those operations. Certainly we understand corn, soybeans, these are self-pollinated crops, wind-pollinated crops. Vegetables, fruit, bees are pretty important, right? So I think they're of great interest to growers. But to have farmers come in here and say, leave the decisions up to us. It's important for us to have tools in the toolbox for the myriad reasons that we've covered. Resistance management, our IPM, we're evaluating the situation. We're trying to make an informed decision on what best product to use. And once you start removing those options from growers, that's when problems arise. Just because you ban a pesticide doesn't mean you ban a pest, and those things will still be there and present. Slippery slope came up. So just to give you a sense, this neonic issue is not new. And I know for those that have been on the committee, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but since 2015, there have been 10 neonic related bills introduced in Vermont. Okay. There has been action and decisions that have been taken on them. They have banned consumer uses in Vermont. Okay, I don't know if any, kind of to the earlier testimony, if any data has been done on that, but basically from what I understand, when it comes to managed pollinators and hives, Vermont is doing exceptionally well right now with their bee populations.
We're told that the regulators and the counters aren't telling us the truth. You can't trust the figures that we're getting.
Well, then what I mean, yeah, I don't, if they've got alternative ideas, then all ears, but I can trust the USDA and the National Agricultural Statistics Service. I heard a question from you yesterday, Senator Collmore, just about those various stressors to pollinators, and does information exist on what each of their impacts on bees? And if you look at USDA NASS's most recent report of August 2023, it lists each of those stressors for Vermont and their impact there. I can either send follow-up information with that report and you can take a look, or I can go through right now what those stresses were in Vermont. But undoubtedly and overwhelmingly, it is varroa mite, time and time again. I think it was only 2 times in each of those quarters where they got data where pesticides was the second least stressor to manage pollinators. So that information is out there. The AIB, so I mentioned the various bills that have been considered in Vermont. Here we are again. There is a playbook by some of these the proponents of this, which we've seen: take away consumer uses, take away applicator uses, take away golf uses, and then now finally we are at agriculture, where we're looking to disrupt and take away the most widely used insecticide, the most popular insecticide for agricultural uses in seed technologies. And I apologize, I've kind of lost my train of thought, but this is not surprising. We've seen this happen now in New York, and I know there's been a lot of input from you on that. But as one of those bills in the past, the Agricultural Innovation Board was established and was required. This is an independent body with various stakeholders from the ag community, and they took, if it's not 100 hours, maybe close to 100 hours of testimony, discussion, sweat equity, because I don't believe they're being paid to be a part of this. They considered this issue by and large last year. That's largely what their meetings and discussions focused on. And ultimately, they came to recommendations. And unfortunately, none of those recommendations are reflected in this bill. Back again to the political nature here. So if we're gonna, what are we doing here? We've again, targeted this chemistry. We've taken away certain uses. Here we are again considering some very important uses for agriculture and farmers in Vermont. So we've established this body to do exactly this, and then they've met for so long and then come forward with recommendations, and none of that's considered. I just don't know, I'm failing, I guess, to understand the process there. I think it's important tools like if you consider tools like this being removed, there are some significant impacts on the farmer. On-farm costs could rise dramatically. Alternative pest management methods, mid-season rescue treatments, the possibility of field replants, and/or the potential for yield reductions under any of these scenarios could rise farmer costs and lower production in Vermont, all of which would impact downstream food costs and consumers. And of course, dairy in particular, who I know you've heard many folks come in this iconic industry in Vermont and speak to this and potential impacts. You all have a condensed growing season. The risk of crop failure due to pests and the ability to replant can drastically impact a farmer's growing season and yield. I want to just quickly focus on climate. Vermont has their climate action plan. And as it relates to agriculture, there's actually a great story to be told when it comes to this discussion and debate around climate, improving CO2, greenhouse gases, sequestration, et cetera. And one of the things in that climate action plan is calls for implementing agronomic practices that reduce tillage and increase vegetation cover, no-till or cover cropping. Prohibiting these tools would severely impact those sort of practices on farm. Low no-till cover cropping help to improve soil health, erosion, greenhouse gas sequestration. We understand that. These practices, in some of these instances, increase the pest presence, soil moisture, those sorts of things, subsurface that would potentially impact seeds planted in their early developmental stages. And this, that soil moisture causes wetter and cooler conditions that are ideal for these diseases and insects. So seed treatments are an important piece of that puzzle to allow for those climate smart ag practices. We've heard a lot about Quebec and Canada and Ontario and some of the programs that they've developed there and were, I guess, trying to import here. I would caution you. I think, I don't know if folks have seen in the media, just as recent as last week, farmers are protesting in Quebec because of some of the government and regulatory decisions, some of the environmental requests that are being made of them. And we all understand now at this point where some of this technology stands in that province. So let's just first acknowledge that and what's happening there. We heard from some of the folks that joined us from Quebec. I heard the agronomists speak, and he made quite clear what his goal is in ideological belief, which is to remove all pesticides, right? So I don't necessarily think that's a smart or wise direction to head in, just given, the factuality that these pests exist and there needs to be a way to manage them. I will say in Quebec that about roughly 80 to 90% of corn seed is still treated with an insecticide, and about 40 to 50% of soybean seed is still treated with an insecticide. We heard that in 2019, neonics went through essentially a de facto ban where you need a prescription for use, and there are agronomists there both in the public and private sector. And in order to get verification to use those products, there has also created a rift in the agronomic community there, because anyone that would prescribe based on the input pest risk assessment that was done by a farmer would then be audited and kind of looked down upon. So diamides have grown in popularity there. We heard that in 2025, diamides will also be removed or prohibited through this kind of de facto ban. And what we might see is actually an increase in neonics, because if you go forward with an actual pest pressure from your pest risk assessment through the agronomist review of that assessment in your fields and recognition that an insecticidal treatment is necessary or appropriate, folks now that diamides and neonics are on the same playing field, folks might have the opportunity to choose one or the other. But the one important thing here too is that there is a government subsidy of, I think, around from $15 to $18 per acre if no insecticide treatment is used. Unfortunately, that's not used quite often because, like I said, 80 to 90% approximately of corn seed and 40 to 50% of soybean seed is still treated. So if you have an insecticidal treatment on there, you don't get a government subsidy. These are just important variables, I think, that we understand and that we consider if we're considering this measure here before you. I've spoken a bit about pollinators. I probably carried on too much past my time, but I just say, I guess in closing, what specific problem, direct problem, are we trying to solve for here in Vermont? Vermont has gone above and beyond. You all already require sales and use data on treated seed, registration of these products for any seed treatments. Your water quality monitoring has shown no detects above EPA thresholds. And according to USDA, NASS, and according to the Agency of Agriculture, managed pollinators are doing fairly well. And I'm not an entomologist, but I know a lot of the discussion is around native pollinators. I would say Vermont is a rich state in habitat, in rural spaces that they can nest, survive, and typically when managed pollinators are doing somewhat well, there is a correlation to the native species. So what problem is it exactly that we're trying to legislate for? I'd place a premium on farmers, on listening to farmers, on letting them make the decision that's best for them, not dictating that or removing their tools and options. And let's not legislate competitive business advantages. Removing this tool doesn't remove the pest problem. There's still going to be a need. Could those be more antiquated chemistries that require more pass-throughs, require higher rates of application, all of these things. Again, neonics were put onto this market and have been quite revolutionary just given their dynamic abilities. This bill leaves countless questions unanswered regarding the protection of pollinators. Meanwhile, the bill would be detrimental to Vermont farmers, would increase food and farm input costs, reduce on-farm climate resilient farming practices, preempt the latest scientific review of neonics, and force farmers to use potentially older methods of managing pest pressures. This bill's unintended consequences negatively impact pollinators, farmer livelihoods, agribusinesses, and Vermont ag climate goals and progress. And I'll just say too, I know, I think with the farmers yesterday, we were talking about, I don't think it would impact fruit, but it does go beyond just corn, soybean, those cereal crops, and does ban application on vegetables, the brassica, bulb vegetables, herbs and spices, stalk, stem, leaf, additional crop categories, essentially. And I know, Senator, you asked yesterday about a teaspoon, I think, being able to kill all the bees in Vermont. I think that's just purely active ingredient. Most certainly EPA's considered that. And these are formulated products that would not contain that amount of neonic to impact bees across the state. So I'll leave you there. I know the gentleman from Cornell publicly listed us on a Cornell slide and used the words like intimidation. I won't get into that, but I'll just say purely inquiring about a report with your name on it, asking questions, clarity, or just general discussion or debate on that report, I wouldn't classify as intimidation. And it's unfortunate that he feels that way. Would certainly be willing to speak with him about it at any point if he's so willing to speak about the report, the 400-page report that he put out. Thank you for your time. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Riley. You're gonna send us the, not the report, but the summary, right?
I'm going to send you the USDA NASS managed honeybee data that lists the stressors and impacts and percentages for Vermont. And I'm going to send you the 2020 EPA, I think it was preliminary interim decision on pollinators.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Riley, I just with all due respect to Scott, McCart from Cornell, I don't think he'd classify the USDA. He wouldn't list them as being intimidating, at least I hope not. And I know CropLife was on there, so I understand that. Can you just talk a little bit more about that survey? You started it, because he had, I think, 5 different stressors. And maybe there's more than 5, I don't know. He listed climate change and pests and pesticides and stuff. And I was sincere in my question. Can you rate each of those? And I used 50%, or maybe I was trying to preload the question. I didn't mean to do that, but I think what you sort of said earlier today, the Varroa mite is number 1 if you're making a list of most stressors. There's no doubt about that. I don't know how long this study went. Are these from beekeepers themselves reporting their losses and kind of guessing about what the stressor was that might have caused it?
Yeah, it's those responsible, those beekeepers that are responsible for managing those hives, and they're reporting in that data. The USDA NASS service puts out an annual report. It's August of each year, so there's it goes back. You can look at data from years in the past. There's August 2023, 2022, 2021, etc. And there's, like he listed, Varroa mite, pesticides, climate, habitat, disease, parasite are some of the more popular ones that are listed there. And like I said, I have in front of me here, I pulled some of that information. And again, I'll send it in follow-up. But first quarter, so winter 2022, there was a 5% loss in Vermont managed pollinators, managed honeybees. Pesticides were at 4%. And that was actually the second biggest stressor that year. The second quarter, 2% loss of honeybees, and pesticides were 0.7%, the least reported stressor. Varroa was the top stressor. Third quarter, 2% loss. Pesticides were 0, the least stressor. Varroa, the top stressor. Fourth quarter, 4% loss. Pesticides were 0.6%, least reported stressor. Varroa was the top stressor. Fifth quarter, winter 2023, 4% loss. And typically you'll get greater losses in winter time, especially in a place like Vermont. Pesticides were less than 0.5%. Varroa was the top stressor. And then the sixth quarter, 2% loss. Pesticides, 0.8%, third most stressor. Varroa was the top stressor. So that, and again, when I send you that, you'll get a chance to see kind of where some of those other stressors fall with regard to the impacts that were reported.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Good. Irene, good?
For now, thanks.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Riley. Appreciate you coming back this morning. We ran over quite a bit yesterday and ran out of time. So thanks again, and we'll be looking for that info that you're going to be sending us.
Will do. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it, and best of luck. And I'll follow up with that information.
Yeah, very good. So. It good numbers.
Mm.
We didn't hear from any of the board members about the application. I don't know, but I mean, people keep talking about, we got some sharp people on that board.
There's a lot of them too. Yeah.
And why aren't we, I don't know if they got called in on the health side or I don't know. If we ought to talk with the chair of the committee, I would think. Sure. Get some kind of Steve is mixed up in he isn't the one that went to all the meetings and didn't get paid and these people donate their phone and some bright people on there, people that are very well qualified. And it would be good to, for our own sake, to listen to them. I think so. Anyways, we'll, I have Michael with us. Morning, Michael.
Morning, how are you?
Well, I don't know. I didn't take my temperature this morning. We've been on 706 pretty steady, so you can take it from there.
Okay.
We're doing okay. Did you have redraft of that?
706?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
I asked Michael to put some stuff together and, it's, what's,
So. Do you want it up on the screen or not?
Yes,
yeah, you could put it up there.
well, we can share mine. You
You have to
can
figure that
share
out.
mine. You can look at mine.
You have to put
Oh,
that-
wait a minute.
If you want to.
These guys too.
We'll give that.
Now we got 2 minutes.
No, now is that.
That's right, one, I had two, sorry.
So should I just walk through this
Yeah.
amendment?
Yeah.
So the amendment does a few significant things. It removes turf from the ban on outdoor application of neonicotinoid pesticides. It amends the exemption process to remove the requirement that there be a determination that there be no effect on pollinators. It moves the effective date on the prohibition on treated seeds to 2031. So you'll see in that first instance of amendment, this is in the definition of environmental emergency. It removes the reference to turf. Because if you're gonna remove the prohibition, you don't need the reference to turf in the environmental. Definition of environmental emergency. And that's the wrong.
And I asked Michael to do this, and it was actually prior to, it wasn't yesterday. So,
So it was a couple of weeks.
yeah, so it wasn't, from the testimony that we heard yesterday in regards to this.
So moving on into the section of the bill related to the prohibition on use and sale of treated article seeds. You'll remember that a person who is subject to the prohibition can seek a written exemption order. The bill as passed the House had a requirement that prior to the issuance of the exemption order, the Secretary of Ag would need to provide a detailed evaluation of the exemption orders and anticipated effect on pollinator populations, bird populations, ecosystem health, and public health, including whether the exemption order will cause undue harm to pollinator populations, bird populations, ecosystem health, and public health. Now, this is one of the things that the agency has said will be difficult, if not impossible, for them to do without additional staff. Specifically wildlife biologists, I think they said. And so that would be removed. And the agency would not need to provide that detailed evaluation of the effect of pollinators and other wildlife.
Yeah, now this is more, like New York.
That is correct. New York does not have this criteria as part of its exemption order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Michael, it seemed like, and I haven't read the original bill lately, but it seemed like there was also a requirement that farmer prove that it was an emergency type situation before the exemption could be granted. I'm probably not using the right word. but-
No, I mean, I do think that's not here for the untreated article seed. You'll see that for the outdoor application.
Okay,
But yes, and that was language that was drawn from the New York bill, not from the 2024 New York bill, from the 2023 New York bill. You might remember that the bill was passed in 2023. The governor signed it, but then said she was signing it with the condition that it was going to be amended,
okay.
which it was, and the emergency language.
Oh, okay.
From the New York bill.
So is that in the original 706?
The emergency language?
Yes.
Yes, and it's still, and it's in 706, it's past the House, but only for outdoor application.
Okay.
Does it go?
Yeah, I guess,
You got it figured out.
well, I'm just trying to figure out how someone would prove that.
Well, you would go and you look at the definition of what is an environmental emergency or an agricultural emergency. So an environmental emergency is any pest that presents a significant risk of harm or injury to the environment or significant harm, injury, or loss to agricultural crops, including any exotic foreign pests that may need preventative quarantine measures to prevent that risk as determined by the Secretary of Ag. So the farmer would offer that it's an environmental emergency because of this pest that presents a significant harm of injury to the environment or the loss of agricultural crops.
Okay.
So somebody was talking about if you went, you had quite a bit of dead corn. You dig a little, I think one of the agronomists would say,
Yeah.
you dig a little trench and you go along, you see the worms and maggots in there dead. And or they're still running around. That would, I guess, be how you.
So it seems like it'd always be behind though.
Yeah,
In
and
other words, it's already happened and
that's the.
can you
problem.
reseed? Yeah.
Well, they can reseed up to a certain
Date,
date, but if you get by that growing date, they talked about 80 or 90 days, you gotta have good weather. If you get beyond that date, there's no need of reseeding because it isn't gonna grow anyways, because you're gonna get frost or bad weather. And so I don't know if there's any way of fixing it in language.
So the emergency aspect of it,
Yeah.
well, you could do just what New York did in their rewrite, and it just says the commissioner shall issue a waiver in the following circumstances. It doesn't say anything about an emergency. It says, the waiver shall be granted at a minimum if the following conditions are met. The farm owner completes integrated pest management training, the pest risk assessment and the pest risk assessment report are completed. Any seeds are only planted on farm properties identified in the pest risk assessment report, and the farm owner must maintain current records of such pest risk assessment reports and records. I mean, the criteria of when you want to issue the waiver or whatever you want them to be, you don't have to follow New York. But you don't have to say emergency either.
So an agronomist, most of these guys have an agronomist on payroll. So if they go and check their cornfield and they find a bunch of grubs and wireworms, they know that there's a problem with that soil
Right.
and
That's for a way.
so we should make that change that to the language that
Yes,
that
indeed.
New York is using,
Okay, I could do that.
Brian.
So, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, so in order to get the waiver, you need to prove what? And it's from the agency bag, right?
Yes.
Provides it, yeah.
So first, you're gonna need to do training on integrated pest management. And integrated pest management is a pest management technique where you implement non-pesticidal management prior to going to insecticidal or pesticidal management.
So you do the training.
They have to do the training, and then there has to be a pest risk assessment report. As the chair just referenced,
Yeah.
the economist or someone of that sort, maybe even if the agency goes out, evaluates your soil and your land for the identification of the pest.
Okay.
And then there is, if there's this waiver, then the seeds can only be planted on the property of the farm where that pest risk assessment report was completed and identified the presence of the pest where the insecticide is needed, pesticide is needed. And then the farm owner maintains records of that pest assessment and the planting of the nicotine treated seeds.
So with the pest risk account, we're just, you're proving, farmer has to prove that the pest exists,
Yeah,
but doesn't the pest exist everywhere or no?
I think what is kind of implied in the New York language is that there's a pest assessment report that indicates that there is the need for the use of that pesticide.
Okay.
It doesn't say that in the New York language, but it's effectively implied.
And we're doing the New York language, is that what?
Well, the chair just asked for that.
Okay.
but we could clarify that rather than, you know, somebody couldn't second guess.
No, I think I understand. We're just based, like, there's going to be something that's going to show that, gosh, I can't get rid of these pests, these, and therefore these can be used.
See, the golf course guy, it's all he got to do is wait until the skunks and the ground cotton
Oh, sir.
came out, dug up the whole fairway. He'd have pretty good evidence that he needs to use it. In a cornfield, what happens is
Yeah.
it just lays over and dies. And then it's too late
Yeah.
to reseed in a lot of cases, especially up north where, you need 80, 90-day corn or you don't make it.
All right, thanks. You can eat that chocolate.
What do you think? I'll split it. I know you're hungry. Brian feeds us well. So.
Shall I move on?
Yeah.
So one of the things that's not in the amendment, but that you should understand,
Thank you.
that's in the underlying bill, is that when the exemption order is issued, that the agency has discretion. Let me find the exact language. That they shall specify where the treated seed will be used and the geographic scope of the exemption, provide a detailed evaluation that an ag emergency or environmental, section. And they will provide an evaluation of of other restrictions related to the use of the neonicotinoid treated artificials. So basically, they establish restrictions, and it's discretionary for them to do that regarding its use.
We don't wanna create, 3 or 4 full-time jobs. Or 3 or 4 new state employees.
So is that what the agency asked for?
3 or 4?
Yeah.
Well, if they gotta do all these reports, but that's not in there, right?
Well, this is, if you're taking out, you're changing the exemption criteria. You're moving to a pest assessment report that's likely gonna be done by an agronomist, but could be done by the agency.
The agronomist.
And you're taking away the requirement that the agency do the assessments and evaluations on pollinator populations and the other assessments that they have to do. I think you are reducing the workload on the agency.
Yeah, if we take that out.
But you will still have a process that will need to be met in order to receive an exemption.
Yeah. So it's saving them that long trip around doing all those assessments.
So, yeah, I mean, I do think it objectively would reduce their workload. Reduce what they would have to do in order to issue the exemption. Should I move on?
Yep.
On page 2 of the amendment, you raised in the walkthrough of the bill, how when an exemption order is issued, the language as passed the House says it shall be managed in the same manner as a report from the General Assembly. You didn't like the managed language, so you just wanted to say the General Assembly shall post the written exemption order to the website of the General Assembly. Not that it's managed in any way. Okay. On the third instance of amendment, on the second page, that basically eliminates the prohibition on the use of neonicotinoid pesticides on turf. You don't see that, but that's what it does by striking subdivision A5. That is where it's a prohibition on the application of neonicotinoid pesticides to turf. So that's where that prohibition would be removed. It would still be prohibited for application to ornamental plants.
Can I just ask a question about ornamental plants? That came up yesterday. Can you give me an example? I think they were talking about nurseries or something.
So yes, I mean, the example I always give is a rhododendron.
Okay.
I mean, it can occur naturally, especially in New England, in the eastern forests, but when it's planted around property, residence, commercial site, that's an ornamental plant, that's not an should be occurring.
Got it. Thank you for that. Thanks.
Should I move on?
Yeah.
The next part of the amendment on page 2, line 13, this is changing the exemption order process for when there's an application for an exemption from the prohibition on the outdoor application of neonicotinoids. So not just the treated seeds, the other applications. And so I think you probably want to go to something similar to New York's language again to mirror that exemption order process. Is that correct?
I think so.
Okay, so that language on page 2 would change. And then on page 3, lines 4 through 7, it's again changing that language about managing the written exemption order and just having the General Assembly posts it to the General Assembly's website. And then last, page 3, line 8 to 9. This would move the effective date for the prohibition on treated neonicotinoid treated article seed 2029, 2031.
I'd like the committee to weigh in on that, and, because we talked about moving it out so that, our board, our pest board and our management board would be able to look at what has transpired in New York and maybe give us some insight of how the New York law is working over there. And we didn't really talk much about that, but I had Michael, I asked him to throw that in. But I think we could run into trouble with that because people are gonna say, oh, it's all you're doing is kicking the can down the road. And I thought about it and I'd almost rather have a trigger in there that says something like if New York decides to
Move their date.
move their date, ours would track this. If New York decided to cancel or do the bill in, that ours would stop as well.
I do like, Mr. Chair, the tracking, the date track could be, I don't know if you're open to that still, but the thought on that is if, given New York's size and their need in terms of the seed industry and stuff like that, my guess is, and I don't know this for sure, but I know you like to follow New York or California.
Yeah, I mean, I'm impressed by both of those. Hey, I wouldn't trade my county for either of those whole states.
Hope happy.
Anyway.
Listening, but if she is,
Yeah,
no, but yeah, so that might tracking it to that date might make the most sense if, for example, because of New York's size, seed industry would have to accommodate them before they would accommodate Vermont, I'm guessing.
they're
And,
10 times.
but yeah, that's one thing I was thinking about, but I don't know what others think.
Thank you, Bob. So, and I agree with Senator Campy on that. I do think there's still some value in being able to look across the lake and see how things are going over there. If there's some unintended disaster that nobody could see. And given the growing cycle, you're always sort of a year behind because you gotta order the seed early enough and.
Yeah.
So I think there's some value, but I don't know how to work on both. But if we're here and we see that, geez, it's really not working over there the way they thought it was gonna. We need to be able to sort of react to it, I think. But I don't know how to move too big, because now you're talking about different dates for different things.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Thank you.
But if it's a disaster over there, I would think they would suspend their order in using that, and that's why
Okay.
we should have a trigger in ours that say, if this is happening over there and
They've moved once.
yeah,
They moved from
27 to
27 to
29.
29, and what if they did that again? And we're sitting here, and I think what we've heard from the seed dealers and everything is what they're most concerned about is we have 90,000 acres, they have 1 million acres, and if what if they move it the last minute again and we're sitting here?
Yeah, and they take a gamble on us being the guinea pig and,
I think, yeah, and we're small as,
Brian.
as directors, and
Hey, you-
the powerful center. The powerful chair of education.
Thank you. Now you got it.
yeah, and we think we're in trouble. With a neck.
It pales
I
in
would
comparison.
trade seats with you. But if you need any help, I'm willing to get right behind you.
So, Michael, how would we phrase that? I think the intent's pretty clear here, but I don't know how to put it into English.
So, you can have what are called contingent effective dates or contingent repeals. And so the effective date could be whatever date you want. Contingent upon if New York, extends the date or modifies the date for the prohibition. The date in Vermont shall extend as well.
Yeah, something like that, or if they shorten it, or if they lengthen it, then,
And then if they
and if they
repeal it,
repeal it, we repeal.
you repeal it.
Then we aren't left hanging out there. I mean, 100,000, 90,000 actually acres.
So the issue with contingencies is they have to be based on a factual occurrence and not the discretion or subjective determination by an entity. So I'll write it as being very, very specific to the New York statute and the dates of the New York statute. So that if they are amended, it's just a factual determination, not say the secretary making an opinion about whether or not it was repealed or not.
Yeah, and, so that would cover the thinking that I was having in regards to the trigger. That exemption would take, or that language would take care of that. If they repealed it, then we.
So can I want to take some notes as to what exactly you want in the changes. So the first is you want to change the exemption order process or criteria. So it's consistent with New York's exemption order. And that would be both for the treated article seeds, and for the outdoor application of pesticides. And that would be on page 1, lines 11 through 20, going on to page 2. And then again on page 2, beginning at line 13, goes to page 3. And then for the effective dates, I'm just gonna have to rewrite the effective dates and add a contingent repeal as well. So that makes that Fourth Amendment look entirely different.
And, we've got the. You guys. We haven't talked about this much, but. The turf thing, you, okay with that?
I mean, if it's the committee's, I'm fine, no offense, with not having the exemption in, but if that's the committee's will, I'd rather move the bill. And get something going with neonics than not, so.
Well, from. The testimony that we've taken.
Yeah.
It sounded to me like there was no, if you don't spray,
It was spray, yeah,
it's all disaster for the fairways and with the grubs growing in in the way they explain they do it. Hell, there wouldn't be any bees out that time of day anyways. And yeah, it just seems like, I mean, it's bad for the farmers, but it's, cause they haven't got money like from golf clubs.
Right.
But it's really disastrous, you know, it's golf clubs. If, it sounded to me like the guy, is it Scott somebody?
Yeah.
Kevin, I think. I could be wrong.
Yeah, you're right, no, you're right.
I mean, it sounded pretty disastrous the way he explained it, and I don't think he was making anything up there. He was telling
Oh, I don't
it
think
the way
he
he
was
has
making
to
it up.
deal with it.
Yeah.
And, they do once a year, and what do you say?
Late June or early July.
Yeah, and but it's the amount too, it's,
Oh,
Uh,
somebody said a spoonful would, you know, kill everybody in the world, I think they said.
Well, I know it was everybody in the world. I think it was half the world population, but
It was a lot of people. And I
All
told them to
pollinators.
bring me a cup full.
pretty.
yeah, and they did it at night, or at least
Yeah,
not during the middle of the day.
no, it's all,
I am curious, oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, I just felt that, you know, I played golf twice, I think, in my life, and I couldn't figure out chasing a little white ball over 4 hours of time was a good, way to spend my time. So, I didn't try it.
No offense. I'm not golf. Oh, I thought you were golf. No. Oh, I thought you were.
I've golfed.
Oh, you are,
I have golfed.
I mean, I don't golf, but yeah, but
Not anymore.
I would call myself a golfer.
you like golfing.
Richie's out there.
Richard's
A couple days. a week.
He's a farmer.
Is it chick? Oh, you're the chicken.
I think I've been on a golf course once in my life.
Well,
Well, I think they demonstrated economic
yeah, really,
Well,
issues.
I just have to say this at the table. A lot more sympathetic for the masses coming in, talking about
Yeah.
their vegetables than I golf.
but they aren't in, right?
I just need to say that because I suspect this bill has got a ways to go in the process and down, and there'll be other iterations that come out before, you know, there a conference committee, if there is, or any of them. But I'm a lot more sympathetic to them. I want to make something workable for people and you know, I think they make the case that, you know, next, we need to do something, and I am supportive of them. I wanna make it workable.
Well, if I'm on the conference committee, we'll be here longer than Trump's gonna be in court. Well, so before we ever settle on it, if the bearings are taken out.
I understand that, but I think we just need to say that.
Well, oh, you just feel better by saying.
Absolutely.
I've been on their farm, but I don't know what they're growing right now. So the ban would apply potentially to leafy vegetables. Old vegetables. Fruit, herbs and spices. And certain other very kind of limited vegetables, petit levé vegetables probably.
But they were concerned about their bearings.
So, are you saying that's up to interpretation?
It's not up to interpretation, it's if they're growing those, then they won't be able to use the endocannabinoid pesticides on the
Leafy vegetables.
vegetables.
But they didn't say they used it. On the veg.
That is right. They weren't using
It's on raspberries and
blueberries, that's right.
Say, Was it you that raised the?
No, I think it was Senator Renner that raised it with the masses. Yeah,
What's the leaf? So which leafy vegetables?
I will have to go to the crop group listings under USDA to actually.
It would be helpful to know that and be clear about that.
and I just was wondering, did, New York didn't exempt golf courses, did it?
Don't know. New York applies to turf.
Okay. I was just curious.
We're one up.
Well, that's where you're gonna want it. If New York were to postpone their law or cancel it, but then your second favorite state, California, implements it, where does that, again, we would come back and we would have to sort of see if we wanted it. Follow California?
Because everything we're doing is tracking New York. Well, you want to track New York, what's the track? I don't know what. I haven't seen California.
No, I don't know.
But
Somebody
I
asked me
would-
last night. I don't think California's, they haven't done anything in this. I mean, they're probably considering it, but,
They have a bill,
but they,
but I don't know where it is in the process.
but I don't think they've passed
Well,
anything.
there, we heard this morning, there's eight
States
other states,
moving in this direction.
yeah, I thought that's what we heard.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing is at 90,000 acres. To have us out in front of states with millions of acres that can put pressure on the seed companies for alternatives and everything.
Yeah, no, I was just curious about California. Yeah.
You know, I'm reluctant to be first.
Well, some things it's good to be first on if you're really, really sure what you're doing is accurate. You know, it's good. A little state can do that and lead the way, but this thing, I mean, we've all heard the testimony. It's you get this side, you get that side, and we're stuck in the middle having to,
Will our farmers be able to get
but,
seed?
so anyways, I think where we are on 706, if we still got people call every day, their email and on them, but this has got to come to an end. Yeah. And so,
Great, thanks.
if we could get to the end, by Friday, it would be most helpful because, you know, it's going to then take part of next week getting it through. Well, then we got 2 more weeks to deal with a committee of conference, but or whatever, and I might roll right through. And on the other hand, if the farmers, the ag agency lobbies the governor big time, he vetoes it, we won't deal with it until June 16th, 17th, somewhere in there, but if we do our work so the farmers aren't all upset and make sense, I think we will be okay. Yeah. They aren't afraid of trying different things, but I just hate putting my initials or name on something that we're selling a bill of goods that aren't quite as good as we were told they were. And you know what we've all heard about Dynamite, it might even be as bad. So, but I think it's important with the emails that we've all received and comments we've had to try to get this as as workable as possible and not do, you know, really any harm if the facts we've heard are anywhere near factual. So, you know, give the manufacturers of these seeds, 3.5 years. But you know, I think we heard that this morning. They say 11 years. Did somebody testify to develop a treatment like this?
I think John did, yeah.
Somebody mentioned 3 years. And probably that's why it cost so much, but we know they make dynamite, and that can be as a treated seed. So I would think they would switch over to that. So anyways, that's where we are on now. Of course, I don't know how many votes we got which way. I haven't done a straw
Oh,
poll.
in here.
Yeah.
Well, it's still in flux, right?
Yeah.
It's changing every day.
Yeah.
So hopefully,
Yeah.
I'm really counting on all of you. I know Brian is in his room for his deal. He's gonna come. Could
In
be
which
my
deal?
Dolly Parton bill.
Listen. Listen, I'm happy to move it as long as the appropriations committee gives the money.
I'm sure we've got one. You send it on down and see how you make it. So anyways, were you doing some work on timber trespass?
Yep.
I don't know why we're getting blessed with all these wonderful bills this year. Jump right from
Right, one controversial to
one
another.
hot fire right into another.
So don't know if that is on your web stuff.
Not yet, I'll put it on.
They met last night.
Oh,
Do you imagine one?
Do you want me to show you?
Oh, anybody want to take a little,
Yes, I did. Yeah, you take 5 minutes to call this?
That possible.
I didn't even get it all out.
Well, we know.
Yeah, well, we,